All right, so now we're recording. It's February 16th. It's 6:32. Tunbridge Planning Commission. We're going to get started tonight with our focused conversation about energy, which we're really excited about learning more about and hearing from our guest speakers. So we are going to start with public comments tonight. If any members of the public have comments to make. Okay, hearing none. I put this for 10 minutes on the agenda and I knew it was going to be too long. So commission updates. So one thing that I had talked about last month was creating a Google Doc folder for all of us to access. So I've sent you all planning commission members access to that folder with 2 documents in it to start with. So if you didn't get the email invitation, let me know, or if you can't figure out how to use it, let me know and I can walk you through it. I'm going to screen share for a second so you can see what is in there when you open it. Okay, so let me see. Okay. So Lynn, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that? Awesome, thanks. So when you sign into Google Docs, you'll see that there's 2 documents in there. The first one is this 2022 topics by month. So it's basically what we talked about last month, how we lined out different ideas to talk about each month. And what I'm hoping is that we can share the responsibility for organizing guest speakers like we did tonight. I think that worked really, really well. So you can see January, what we covered, February, what we're covering and who we're talking to. March, we were going to talk about some town planning focused ideas. So Michael Saka's got a Tunbridge downtown idea he wants to share. And then we had brought up the idea of Act 250 updates and how they impact our town that has no zoning. So we need to find a speaker for that. I think there's somebody at the Agency of Ag who actually may be a good speaker for this portion. So I'm happy to ask him. Does anybody else on the call know an Act 250 expert or somebody that could speak to it beyond Two Rivers?
Oh, yeah,
Brenda.
just Kevin Geiger at Two Rivers.
Okay, I'm going to ask Kevin too.
I would also recommend somebody from Vermont Natural Resources Council, Jamie Fidel, possibly.
Okay, can you connect me with that person, Michael?
Yes.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Also, Tim Taylor from, I think he's pretty involved with Act 250. And so he's a farmer, Tim Taylor from Crossroads Farm, but he's been on, is there a committee or a commission?
There is actually.
I think he's on that. I don't know if, but
he's the chair of the District 3 area.
Okay. Pops in at the nick of time.
Great. So Tim Taylor, Ari Rockland Miller, he's the fellow from the agency I work with, who's the Act 250 designation coordinator. And then Michael, you're going to connect me with
Jamie Fidel.
Okay, awesome. Great. So now we've got our speaker. So what I'm hoping is that by putting things in a document, we can all look at them and say like, oh, next month we're supposed to talk about forest fragmentation and we have nobody on here to talk about it. So we can organize even if I'm not around for the meeting. So somebody else can be in charge. Or somebody else, can take charge of planning particular meetings depending on the subject. So that's one way we'll use this. We planned out topics through June. So we'll need to start thinking about post-June, probably next month. We can think about topics for July and August, or if we want to take a midsummer break, depending on what's going on, knowing that everybody gets pretty busy. Then the other page that's in here is a structure and operations guide, which I don't know if the planning commissions had. If they did have it, I couldn't find it in the town office. So it's pretty short at the moment. It has state statutory reference regarding planning commission operations and authority. So we can always reference it pretty easily just by going to those sections. Then it's got the commission members and the seats by year. So we know when we should be re-electing people and people know who's on the commission at the moment. Our 2019 update to membership and voting. So the minimum numbers, the maximum numbers, what a quorum is, and how the select board's represented as an ex officio seat. Then our 2 reports that are commission led and required by the state, when they've been revised, when the revisions are due by, and any notes, like that the town plan takes at least a year for any major overhaul. So we know we need to start it well in advance of the due date. And then our primary supporting organizations. So we'll continue to add to this as we find more resources or do more projects. But I felt like it was important to get all of this onto paper for all of us to have access to, as there's, you never know when somebody's going to have a life circumstance change and want to switch seats. And so somebody new can come on and just read through this and get a sense of how we do our work, who's here, and when we have next big reports due. So any questions there? I saw Amy, you were in there, so you made it. Congratulations. Yeah, so again, if you have any trouble accessing it, just let me know, and I can walk you through. We can screen share, or I can help you get into the Google Doc. And everybody has access to add new documents. So all you have to do when you're on that homepage is click on the new button, and it gives you options for what kind of document you want to make. It can be a Word doc, Excel, all sorts of different things. And that can be a place where we can put brainstorm ideas down, or if we're working on a shared letter, we can put it in there instead of sending it back and forth by email. So lots of opportunity here to make our collective effort a little bit easier. Okay, so that's commission updates. Are there any other updates from planning commission members at this point?
Just to thank you for doing that.
You are welcome. Michael, you don't get access to it because you're not a planning commission member. If you join us when the seat comes up next, then you can access it.
And I don't get it either.
That's right. No members of the public get it. Just the seated planning commission members.
So we have to quickly take a screenshot to
Yeah,
catch.
if you want like all of our inside knowledge, for sure. That was your opportunity. Well, it's captured on video anyway, so it's there for all eternity to see what we're doing for the next 5 months. There was an interesting email that I received and the select board received from Liz York about the piece of property that's for sale just north of the Mill Bridge on the riverside. It's in the floodplain. It's about 7 acres. And I was wondering if we wanted to talk about that if it doesn't sell as part of our Act 250 dialogue / flood resiliency, because it is in the floodplain, even though it comes with a septic plan. I'm not sure where the septic plan is supposed to be cited. Liz was indicating that she felt like the town should buy it and use it for a nature path or recreational opportunity or something to pull it out of use, since it is primarily located in the floodplain.
So,
I thought that was
Laura,
Mhm.
to interrupt on that, there was a buyout plan. Stephen from Two Rivers, I see, is here. I don't know if he's familiar with it. And I know they extended that where they actually, FEMA would buy it out for us.
Okay. Yeah, so Stephen, I don't know if you have any more information about that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't, but I can look into it. I know that's a program. I think primarily Kevin was in
Yes, he
charge
was.
of. Yeah. But Brenda, let me look into it and see where we're still at on that.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
their deal is they buy it out for fair market value
Mhm.
and then it gets removed. the building so it doesn't ever flood, go down,
Yeah.
take the bridges out, and we can plant it with an orchard or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, there's no building on it currently, but it has a septic plan, a prepaid septic plan or something like, I forget what the ad said exactly. But it did indicate that you could build on it. And there is that portion where somebody's had that construction trailer parked for a number of months. And I was wondering if that was the only spot you could build a house, but the rest
Oh,
is
ac-
down there where that beaver dam was.
I think Rudy was working on that. They can build down there if they put it on stilts, you know,
Oh.
like a lot of the buildings down here. They have to do it in a certain manner. So Rudy's the one, when he comes on, you can probably, that's a good one to say because he's been working on it.
Okay, yeah, I think it'd be interesting just to find out more information if there is a buyout or if the town could buy it with some of the ARPA, the federal ARPA dollars that are coming in as a recreational spot or set aside for town use. So that's the only other update I have. Anything else from Planning Commission? No, great, okay. Lynn, I apologize that I dropped the E in your name in multiple places.
It's okay, just don't call me Lenny.
Okay.
So it's fine.
All right, so Lynn Hadley, Tunbridge resident extraordinaire, is joining us tonight to talk about a particular Green Mountain Power project that you have some additional information on.
Yeah, not too much. And Brenda, I didn't know if you were going to be here or not, but I just want to put for context to say this happened out of conversations I had with Brenda regarding emergency preparedness and a concern that the village of Tunbridge have access to potable water when in an emergency, and also off-grid power supply. So we had been told about a pilot project for Green Mountain Power was doing. So Brenda asked me to just follow up and find out what was going on. And in fact, there's one and potentially two pilot projects right now. The one that sounds most interesting is being done with two towns, one in central Vermont and one in southern Vermont for the year, for this current calendar year. They've picked their two towns. But they hope to continue the project, and it may change in terms of what they're doing with each individual town. I think what's interesting for us to know is that they're picking towns that have the most outage challenges. And challenges with connectivity and reliability and capacity. And we are at the bottom of the top third for that on the list of towns that are problematic. And the woman who runs this she's running the resiliency zones part of GMP, Sarah Ludwin-Peary. And she said, you know, that may sound like you're really low down, but the truth is we also want to work with towns who are interested, who have really interesting potential. And so the fact that you guys are interested is like, you're on our radar. So that was really good. And she also was pretty clear that, again, they're running pilots because there's a lot they don't know about what it means to support different towns and what a microgrid might look like in one town versus another town. So, and you know, we weren't even necessarily talking about microgrids, but that's what I got into. The other person that I spoke to at Green Mountain Power is the person who is responsible for all the business accounts for Central Vermont regarding efficiency. And anybody who's not a resident, it's not a residential customer, is a business customer for them. So towns, organizations. And he said, you know, we would be thrilled to set up a time to come out with Efficiency Vermont and do a real initial look at your town and what can happen. And he sounded really great. I'm just checking my messages here. Oh, he also pointed out that Green Mountain Power is doing a bunch of different things right now for towns. And that those will be changing. For example, they're paying towns to consider having battery storage to help resiliency on the grid. They are looking for towns that want to have EV charging stations. I thought immediately of our 2 town stores, that are opening back up. What else? I guess the only other thing is I had another conversation, and it was with Stephen Strong, just because I wanted to connect with him. And he said he'd be happy to walk around also and look at what makes sense for the town. So the only other piece to mention is that we had this brilliant idea as well, that, maybe we could solve some of these challenges by having the town get a Ford F-150 electric truck. And then we would have this power source and it would be fully mobile. Wouldn't that be great?
You weren't supposed to tell them about that yet. We were all gonna get them and then hook them up in parallel if we
This
ever
is
need
what-
them.
Brenda said for sure the emergency management coordinator needed one. So that's my report. And I guess I'd say one other little thing, which is in terms of having good relations, I may not be involved with things that go forward, but it would be probably good for me to hand off to whoever does do this, the 2 people that I've been in contact with at Green Mountain, because we had good connection, good long talks. So done.
Thanks, Lynn. Any
Welcome.
questions for Lynn?
Yeah, just a little background too. When Lynn and I first started talking about this, she was asking me where she could help out. And as the emergency director, we slowly have realized for a while now that we had to have one of our places to go to for, say, the school. If we had to relocate and reunite kids, it would have to be the town hall, not the fire department where it originally was put. And including if there's a flood, the flooding, that wouldn't be a good spot right there at the firehouse. Anyways, it doesn't have backup power and the water isn't secure. And then we got into the town offices also. If there was a big school event, we need the town offices plugged in too. So that led into a lot of this discussion of how to solve this. It's been going on for Simon Bradford, the fire chief, and I've been pondering this for the last 1.5 years.
Thanks, Brenda. Well, that's exciting with the update, Lynn. I think it sounds like there's potentially some real opportunity, some interesting projects we can get engaged in.
Sounds exciting.
Do any members of the public have questions for either Lynn or Brenda? Yeah, go ahead, Henry.
So I don't know if this is a question, and I'm not sure whether it really takes us where you want to go, but it's also would be good to recognize that Washington Electric is covering much of the high ground in Tunbridge. So your Green Mountain Power, if they've got their hand up to work with us, obviously a good place to start. And it would be the logical place probably for an emergency, would dovetail in with an emergency center of some kind. But just if I would put my hand up to contact Bill Powell at Washington Electric and find out if they have any programs that might fit into this. I don't have my hand up very high, but I would be willing to do that piece of it.
I can see your hand though.
That would be excellent. And then we'd have information. If you could email it to one of us, we can share it out so that we have information about both the co-ops that supply power to this town. Yeah, Michael.
So Lynn, so I may have missed it, but what are the next steps with Green Mountain Power, and are there deadlines or anything like that?
The only next steps are for us to initiate something. And, I think we could learn a lot by having an initial review done. and have people who are really interested in working with this, walking around together and talking about it. But that's at our initiative, and there's nothing timing based except that each year they're going to be choosing their pilots. So they've got 22, but they are still looking for who's they're going to work with in 23. So,
I mean, so we should move on it then, right?
Mhm.
well, but that's if we want to look at that level of what does a microgrid really look like? And, you know, it's quite possible that we could meet many of the needs we're talking about right now with a simple and small array or several in different places. You know, it doesn't, so scale is a question here, and how much gets lumped into one project. Yeah, and we also have so many different centers that, given the two villages and the town garage, et cetera. So is that helpful?
Mhm.
I think it still helps to try to get them here. You know, we won't learn unless we have them come here and talk to us.
Bring 'em
And
out.
show interest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Stephen, is that maybe something that you're going to touch on as opportunities for how we get engaged in projects like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So we're going to
Yeah.
bring this full circle here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Todd, you've got your hand up.
Just make sure I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure thing.
Okay, well, I'm glad that Stephen, I think Stephen's going to cover some of this ground, whether it's EV charger, difference between microgrid and being tied to the grid, which Jim Mears is going to be talking about. Yeah, this is a unique opportunity with the ARPA funds and with the history of Tunbridge trying to get its own solar array, much less being tied into a larger array like it might happen up at Bilnet. And I'm pretty encouraged by all of this. As far as just briefly on the EV charger, and Henry will probably have a laugh here, but yeah, the downtown areas are definitely preferable. We've got the fairgrounds, we've got the reopening Tunbridge store here soon, and it's great to hear the North Tunbridge store is going to be opening probably sooner than the downtown one. But I've already looked at a couple of sites that I think would be ideal. We could get into that maybe in a separate meeting, but we should definitely keep an eye on things as far as a lot of other issues go. And I like the way this discussion's going. So that's just my 2 cents for now. I'll probably check in later.
Thanks, Todd. All right, any other questions for Lynn or Brenda at this point? All right, hearing none, we can always circle back around. Jim, I see you are here live and
I
in
am.
person.
Yes.
So I'm going to hand the floor over to you to talk about an update on the Bilnet Brook solar array project. And I know Shona and Suzanne are also present with us.
Great, thank you. To bring it a little full circle, I just wanted to go back to your microgrid discussion. So we happen to be doing work with GMP, and GMP put out an RFP for a central Vermont town. It's actually Rochester. And we won that RFP to provide resiliency to downtown Rochester. So I think that you can probably learn a lot from those pilots. I think it's a great idea to bring people over. I think Tunbridge is well suited in comparison to some of those towns because you face some of the same challenges. You're on a single road, you've got a river next to the road. You have the benefit of three-phase power, which really opens up opportunities for you. The only thing that I see as a challenge that you should look at is you are a historic downtown district, which just makes it a little bit more of a challenge clearly from a solar perspective to site something. And maybe the array, one question to ask, I think anybody that comes is, could the array down at Bilnet Brook actually somehow or rather be connected into this microgrid? It might be a little further than they wanted, but it's an option and it's something that's there. It's an asset. And even though it's a net metering array, it's electrons going onto the grid. So however they end up kind of breaking the circuits, anything within that area can be powered by that array when the sun shines. And then the Rochester grid, the Rochester resiliency comes along with a large battery storage. So it can help ride through a long period of time. And the hope is that you'll also get some sunshine in that period that can also kind of recharge the batteries and provide an extended life for the battery. But it's a sizable battery. And for the economics of the batteries to work, it's really great if they can be connected to three-phase power, which you have. So sorry for the slight digression. Bilnet, Brook. So we filed back in August. Oh, I'm so sorry. We filed back in August for a net metering CPG, Certificate of Public Good for Bilnet Brook. It's a 500 kilowatt array. It's the largest size array you can get under the net metering program. Some of you might have remembered we had an option for a 2.2 megawatt array there, which would have been under a standard offer program. We did not win that standard offer bid. It's a reverse auction. Those that provide the lowest bid win. And the costs associated with the 2.2 on a hillside in Tunbridge and the interconnection costs, it was just, we were out of the running by a little bit. So the fallback position was the 500 kilowatt net metering array. So we filed that at the end of August. GMP is required to do a study to make sure that it can electrically interconnect. So while that study was being done, the Public Utilities Commission, which is the regulatory body that provides the Certificate of Public Good, which is the thing you need, one of the things you need, but an important piece to be able to build an array. So they stayed the project while that feasibility study was in place. Stayed is basically paused reviewing any of the application. The feasibility study was finished in November. By the end of December, the Public Utilities Commission had not removed the stay. So we filed a motion to say, hey, is there a reason why that you can't put this back in motion and for review? So they opened it back up on 1/18. The process started again. And that opened up a 30-day window for comments from the public. And as of today, there are 0 comments, which is awesome. Generally, people don't write in. Unfortunately, this is awesome. I want to do more of these. Is usually on the other side of the spectrum. And the fact that there's no comments is great. Tomorrow's the last day for comments. And generally, when there's no comments and it's not contested in any way, shape, or form, it moves through the Public Utilities Commission at a reasonable rate. I can't tell you what that rate exactly is going to be. We've had some with really no issues take 18 months to get through. And then some that we thought were just going to be, nightmares get out in 6 months. So it's a little bit of it depends on a lot of variables. Sometimes I think it's just the person that's reviewing it is in charge of it. We anticipate, because there's no problems, the way we put this on our schedule is that we would get the Certificate of Public Good sometime this summer. What that would mean is probably most likely due to restrictions, two factors. The permit will come with some conditions, which means we can't build during deer wintering time. So no construction can happen. And that probably means we won't begin to build until April 15th, 2023. The other challenge that I'm sure you've all heard of is the supply chain challenge. So even if we were to get a Certificate of Public Good and say, hey, we're going to try to build this before the deer wintering starts, it's highly unlikely, unfortunately, that we can get the materials to build the array this year. So we are anticipating that we'll get the array built starting 4/15, which is when the deer wintering ends, starting at that point in time, 2023. And so if anybody wants to keep track of this process as it goes along, the Public Utilities Commission has an electronic interface. It's called the EPUC. If you Google EPUC, you'll get in there, and you can search cases. And this has a case number, which is 213207. I think it's NMA. If you put that in, it'll bring you right to the Bilnet Brook solar project. And in it, you can see this, anything has changed. If you want, you can always call us if you want. But if you just are bored someday and you want to check out this awesome website, you can type in 213207 in the case search under EPUC, and you can see all of the records. And I think it's a wonderful thing. So everything we filed, you can see the aesthetics report, the feasibility study, Agency of Natural Resources assessment. Everything is there to peruse through. You won't, unless something changes, be able to see any public comments, which is fantastic. That's also available there as well. So that's my update on the status and progress. And as at this point, we don't have an identified off-taker. So an off-taker is the name of people that will use the power. So generated from here and get the net metering credits on their bill. So if Tunbridge community, not the Tunbridge community, unfortunately, that lives on those lines supplied by Washington Electric Co-op, but if the Green Mountain Power Tunbridge residents have a need for power or net metering credits, we're open to working to see what we can do to help support Tunbridge's needs.
And when we had met with you over the summer, sometime when we could sit outside,
Yep.
About this project, we had pitched the idea of using those credits to support the school and town offices, so to reduce the expenses for all town members. Is that still an opportunity for us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Close towns that we've done Bradford, water and sewer, and the town, Woodstock, Hartford, lots of towns and lots of schools.
At what point in the process does that decision get made, and who makes that call?
I would say right now, if you come to us by seeing this is going to be under construction, let's say 4/15, the typical process is we don't generally start construction on a speculative nature. We usually have somebody that's going to own the array. If it's not us, somebody else is going to own the array. Most anybody that's getting financing is required to have, like, who's buying the power? Are you really going to be able to pay back your loan, et cetera? So that ideally starts I'm giving you more information you probably want to know, but that ideally starts like in October of this year, that process of getting the financing in place so that we can hit the ground running. And particularly since lead times, the supply chain is so problematic, we're putting out lots of money just to secure equipment that might not be here. And I'm not picking on GMP when I say this, but we're putting down money on transformers for projects that won't happen until 18 months from now. So the point of that is that we have to have these things kind of lined up financing wise before we construct, and we need to know who the off-takers are. And it's a very simple process. Again, lots of references local to you that can tell you how it's worked for them and how they've worked through it, and contracts that have gone through multiple town reviews that again help make it simpler.
Okay, that's helpful. Looks like we've got a couple of questions, Henry and then Todd.
Yeah, Jim, I just, two questions. One, I guess, while we're talking about financing for it, should we be trying to prime the pump at town meeting this year?
So the way that this typically works is that you're disadvantaged being a nonprofit. So the big mechanism behind the financeability of solar, and maybe I'm getting you wrong. I mean, take it two ways. If you're asking about should the town buy it, it's always better for a third party to buy it because they can take the tax credit and they can depreciate the array.
Okay.
You just can't make it economic for a nonprofit to do it on their own. If Build Back Better passed or elements of Build Back Better passed, it had a provision that would allow nonprofits like yourself, the town, to get a grant in lieu of tax credit that would levelize or equalize the field. But any of us can predict what's going to happen with that bill. So currently, there's a 26% investment tax credit. So 26% of the cost of the array is a credit on someone's tax liability. And that's really the significant driver behind that, and why I can't think of really any towns or schools that own an array unless they have a very wealthy benefactor that just gifted it to them.
So how has that happened in other towns where the schools and town buildings are involved?
So we have a process. There's a method called in common terms, it's called a power purchase agreement. For very arcane reasons in Vermont, it's called a net metering agreement. And a net metering agreement basically is a commitment, let's say by the town to buy a certain amount of power for the next 20 or 25 years. And in the case of Bradford, it's a commitment to buy power at a 14% discount. So no matter what happens to GMP rates, in this case, we're GMP, you're always going to get a 14% discount off your rates. No money is put down by Tunbridge. No operational obligations are taken on by Tunbridge. No liability is taken on by Tunbridge other than a commitment to buy the power for the next 20 or 25 years. The owner of the array is the one that has the operational risk, takes on the debt, gets the tax credit, and operates the array, and then sells you the net metering credits. If you get $1 worth of net metering credits on your bill, you pay back the owner, in this case of Bradford, 86 cents. And you keep those 14 cents for every dollar that's put on your bill, which is your savings. I don't know if that's a really quick.
So
description.
that means that you need an investor involved in this to make it work.
Right. And that's what we do, is we pair people with a tax liability and access to financing with people, particularly nonprofits, that can't make this work other than with a third-party investor.
Oh, so you're actually frequently providing the investor.
Yeah, that's what we build solar arrays, but to build solar arrays, we have to pair it with this other piece, or else nothing would unfortunately get built.
Okay, and then the other side, just want to double check. Am I right that that Green Mountain Power gets the renewable energy credits from this kind of an array?
So from this type of array, this would go to meet what is called the Tier 2 requirements for GMP. So Tier 2 is a certain component of our renewable energy portfolio needs to be supplied with local renewable generation. So right now it's 10% requirement. There's a bill actually in the legislature that Senator Pro Tem introduced that brought it up to 25%. And all of the net metering credits go to meeting that 10%, currently 10% obligation. And the utility takes them and retires those in state. If I'm making sense to you. You can hold on to those RECs, the owner could, but the financial penalty is so severe that it's it makes projects uneconomical to build. So the fact that this is helping those credits for tier 2, I don't want to get into tier 1 credits, that's a different issue. Tier 2 credits, because they are held by the utility to meet their obligations, they're staying in Vermont and those aren't being sold off someplace. Great question.
All right, next up is Todd.
Yeah, here I am. Yeah, really appreciate your participation tonight, Jim and Henry, who I'm going to see tomorrow. On the project, I think that we have to be clear about trying to get the off-takers, local off-takers. And Michael Livingston, over the current principal at the elementary school, I emailed Jamie Canarney, the superintendent of the supervisory union. So, and I don't know about what the fairgrounds might want to do, but my question to Jim about that, is there an advantage to having a lot of local off-takers kind of committed in that advanced time that you mentioned before, as far as the investor interest, et cetera? And I think we might have 1 or 2 potential major investors that are new to town that you're probably aware of. But just as far as the timeline of getting people at least raising their hand and saying, we want to be major investors or off-takers, not investors, but off-takers of this project.
Sooner is always better. You know, having local Tunbridge participation, like many things, it's a good, and I don't mean this facetiously, it's a good story. And it makes people feel really good about investing in an array like this. So we recently did an array in Clarendon, Vermont, and it ended up, this particular investor wanted to do this project because it was supporting low-income housing. And so many of our investors, and that's why I like working with this group of investors that we have. It's a broad group, but they generally are very interested in who they're providing the power to. Another investor really was excited about, we built an array for Norwich, in Norwich for King Arthur Flour. And his 8-year-old son was into baking and loved King Arthur. And so the connection for this person to find out that they could actually invest in an array that supplied power to King Arthur Flour was fantastic. And so it doesn't provide, you know, the electrons go onto the grid and they go everywhere, but it makes, you know, I don't know, it feels good when you can actually build something in a community and have the benefits from what's being built flow to the community. So we always go to the community first to see if we can connect the two together. So this will be discounts off power bills that will be going to Tunbridge residents. You know, if it's for the town, it goes to every taxpayer. If it's the school, same thing. The array will generate property tax for the town. The array will generate income for the education fund, as there's a statewide tax on solar as well. So there's a lot of benefits that spur out of this, that benefit Tunbridge already, but the more that we can have Tunbridge residents or businesses or organizations connected, I think it's more money staying local, and it just is a much better story. I mean, isn't this what we want to do? I'm sure your town plan talks about being able to generate your own energy. And if we can connect your own community to it, it just helps perpetuate or further what you're trying to do in your town plan.
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so it sounds like a conversation with potentially the select board about if they'd be interested in signing up the town buildings and the school would be a reasonable next step. And
Yep.
then see where it goes from there. Okay.
Yep. And I think we had talked about the Orange County Child Parent
Yeah,
Center.
parent-child center.
Parent-child center, you know,
Mhm.
any organization, and particularly any nonprofit. And so we we're really proud. In 2020, over 50% of our offtake went to low income housing. And then from there, it was schools and municipalities. These are all things that everyone benefits from. Sometimes net metering is a little maligned, but the benefits stay in Vermont and they flow to Vermonters. And that's, to me, what gets me up in the morning to go out and keep doing more of this. So particularly any nonprofit, we're really interested in. We're interested in small businesses too. But again, if you don't have that tax liability, you can't really go out and do this on your own. So we really try to seek out the nonprofits because this is really their only opportunity to get access to solar. And that's why we go after the low income community. They might not have a tax credit like a lot of residential customers to be able to take advantage of solar. So again, by doing these types of net metering agreements, low income customers can participate even though they don't have a tax liability. And if there's not enough on Tunbridge, I'll put my last words and I'll let your meeting go on. We have about 20 or 30 dairy farms, large dairy farms that are looking for solar. So a lot of our portfolio, I said 2020, a lot of our portfolio was low income housing. I have a feeling a lot of our portfolio in 2022 and 2023 will be Vermont dairy farms. And again, it makes us feel great because as you know, in Tunbridge, it's not easy to stay in farming, dairy farming particularly. So if we can help out and help people, keep people on the land a little longer, that's what we're trying to do.
Thanks.
Great. If you have any questions, Miriam, MERIAM, you can see it right there at nordsolar.com, and I'm happy to follow up.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. That was great.
You guys are a really well-functioning planning commission. I get to see a lot of them, so I commend you.
Thanks.
Great.
All right, so next, Stephen Bauer from Two Rivers Ottaquechee Regional Commission, here to talk to us generally about opportunities for the town related to energy, decarbonization, and meeting our climate change goals. So I know we kind of talked about some of the things you might be talking about earlier, so you can feel free to loop those in, or whatever other topics seem interesting based on the conversation or suitable for a town like ours. We'd love to hear them.
Yeah, well, let me start by just thanking you for having me. It's good to be in Tunbridge in spirit. And while we're throwing out praise, I do want to say, Jim, that was a very well done explaining a power purchase agreement and all the things that go into actually getting something built and the off-takers. It could be very complicated to explain, and you did it in a very great job. So you can definitely tell how often you have to tell folks about this.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to kind of jump in off of the conversation with Jim is more so and kind of related to the middle of the things that I was going to talk about. But that's as good of a starting place as any. And I kind of want to, so I had both town-owned solar arrays and community solar arrays that I wanted to talk about tonight. And I think one of the things that, while dealing with renewable energy with towns throughout our region, a lot of times towns immediately go to, this is something that we have to build on municipally owned land that we own the array, or it's on our town garage or whatever. And that's not the only way. I mean, Jim just explained it really well of other ways that Tunbridge can be an off-taker, get some benefit, and also go towards these goals that you guys just worked really hard to put together and updating the town plan, which, fingers crossed, next week we'll fly through with flying colors and get the advanced energy determination. And so that I just wanted to kind of start there while talking about renewable energy. I mean, the great thing about the Belknap project, one thing, like Jim mentioned, it seems like every other 500 kilowatt proposed project is getting a lot of pushback right now throughout the region. So just again, hats off for the great siting and all the people that were involved in that. You know, again, cross our fingers through the public comments tomorrow, but that looks to be going through. So kind of turning to specifically the town plan and the energy chapter of the town plan, because I was lucky enough to actually be able to do that. So I got to review the hard work that you all put in on the town plan and specifically the energy chapter. So let's back up a little bit and just think about, you know, what has changed since the last town plan was adopted in October 24th, 2017. Certainly a lot. You know, right before that, we had the Act 174 standards that had passed, which created the enhanced energy determination. So far, 9 towns in the T-Rourke region have received that determination. So Tunbridge, as long as everything goes well, would be the 10th. So other legislation, you have the Global Warming Solutions Act passed, you know, which that created the Climate Council and the CAP, the Climate Action Plan that was just released. I want to say, yeah, December 2021. In conjunction with that was the update of the 2022 Comprehensive Energy Plan, which that will update some Act 174 standards and how we kind of get to that determination. So that's just kind of getting a little bit of the background. And so, but I also want to hear from you all. That's kind of the background. I want to hear about opportunities or questions that you have. And if you don't have any, I do have a list to kind of go through.
Does everybody know that the town is planning on updating, building onto the town garage coming up? So that might be an opportunity that would fold into this with our talk about energy. That's a beautiful sunny spot over there, as we've all noted before.
Chris and Sylvie.
Hey there. So this is a question for both Jim or anyone who can answer this, but I have a feeling maybe Jim and or Stephen. So I'm really curious about if the town of Tunbridge is involved in solar. If we as a town have a say as to what happens with the renewable energy credits. Because it seems like with these projects, the renewable energy credits go to Green Mountain Power or the utility. And then I understand that the utilities, or in this instance, I think would be Green Mountain Power, oftentimes, you know, trades those out, like sells the renewable energy credits and then makes a profit on them and then ends up buying power that isn't so clean and green. And that's actually what is a larger part of our energy mix.
Steve, feel free to take that one if you want, but otherwise I'm happy to give you what I understand.
Hey, go ahead, Jim.
So there is, I had mentioned it when I was talking that I was not getting into necessarily tier 1 and other resources. So Vermont's renewable energy portfolio or standard definitely has some holes in it. And some of those holes allow for the purchase of Sweetie, and I apologize, unbundled Hydro-Quebec RECs, renewable energy credits, that can offset fossil fuels and be claimed as then you can make a claim that it's renewable.
Mhm.
No one really in New England, we belong to ISO New England, recognizes the Hydro-Quebec RECs beyond Vermont. That is a problem. You should talk to your representative about that. That should be fixed. Absolutely. The tier 2, which is the local piece, these RECs are in a different kind. There's tier 1, which is where those Hydro-Quebec RECs pop in. The tier 2 RECs created from net metering projects are supposed to stay in Vermont and not be sold. It's the tier 1 resources. So there's some old resources, let's say Kingdom Wind, that those are real RECs, those are good RECs. You can sell those in Massachusetts for a fair amount of money, and you can buy renewable energy credits from Hydro-Quebec for about a third of the price. And so that arbitrage nets you a couple cents. That is a different category than how these net metering credits for this array fit in. So that's tier 1 resources, which is unfortunately the bulk of our portfolio. And tier 2 resources, which is the smaller component of our renewable energy portfolio, right now is only 10%. And that's where these renewable energy credits go and are supposed to stay to meet the state's obligations, or the utilities' obligations to have local renewable power. And again, as I was saying before, Senator Ballant has introduced a bill to move it from 10% to 25%, which will only put more pressure on making sure credits now and in the future stay in Vermont. So it's a great question. I would say tier 2 credits like that come off of net metering projects like this are going to be staying in Vermont and not sold. Older resources, good resources, like some of those wind projects that happened a while ago, those are eligible to be sold and replaced with cheaper renewable energy, quote unquote, renewable energy credits. That is an issue. And I probably, some of you have seen the letter going around to House Energy and Technology Committee to try to see if they can fix the renewable portfolio standard. And clearly this is something that should happen.
Yeah, I think that it's important for, it's a lot to kind of wrap our heads around, but right now is a time where, there's a lot going on in the legislature. And if anybody who's here on this, meeting tonight are interested in finding out more about that, because I think it's really, really important for us to be able, I'm just starting to learn and wrap my head around it, but it's been a problem, and it's one of the reasons in Vermont, it's one of the reasons why Vermont is well below many of the other New England states in how in our carbon emissions. So yeah, anyway, thank you for your answer, and it's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Todd.
Yeah, good explanation there, Jim. And yeah, the tier 2 are definitely very different than tier 1. And yeah, I did sign off on that petition, and I don't know if the legislature is going to come through on taking away some of the stuff that some people might quantify as greenwashing. To go back to Brenda's comment about the town garage, Tunbridge has explored potentially town-owned solar projects for more than a decade now. There was a vote a number of years ago where we had a grant of $50,000, and the town actually had an overage at that point in the budget of $50,000, and we needed to vote whether we would bond the remaining $50,000 to put a 30 kilowatt array up that the town would own. It failed by 7 votes, which was unfortunate. We could have been at the forefront of being a town that had its own solar project. The town garage has been explored, actually, with one of the associates of Jim at Norwich Solar Technologies, probably 4 to 5 years ago. I actually had Integrity Energy come out there, being the energy coordinator for Tunbridge, and the siting and their aerial photographs, and there's so I would advocate in the future, not only, obviously, a lot of us would hope that the project on Bilnet Brook goes through and the PUC signs off on that, but as far as backup power that may supply dependable power term outage for emergency services for the town, that would be a very good spot to have it. Also, I think the property that is mentioned by Liz York and Laura referenced at the beginning of this meeting may be right along the road. I don't know if that's the property owned by Brent Lindstrom, but it's certainly along that same stretch of road. I think it could serve a dual purpose for recreational fields as well as solar. So there's lots of opportunities. And yes, Green Mountain Power is very interested in having long-term solar storage. Royalton committed to an agreement to that. And so I think that this is the year that we could really make some inroads. And I'd like to go back to Stephen to talk a little bit about how the ARPA funds may play a role in a project like that for backup solar for emergency, but also the role of weatherization, particularly in a town like Tunbridge in Orange County, one of the most energy burdened counties, Orange County, in the state.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. We'll kind of get off the renewable chain, but I think that as that town garage, as the planning continues to go through, it's much easier in the sense of designing, building. If there was a array to go on top of the roof, it's a lot easier to do that at the designing stage, as well as if you were to run conduit for eventually putting in EV chargers. Once we get the infrastructure money and stuff, that would be just having things kind of EV ready and electric ready. But to turn to kind of the decarbonization side, no matter what we're talking about, weatherization, how we're going to heat, whether that be heat pumps or new advanced wood heat, the new technologies, weatherization is always there. So right now, there's a couple bills, and Todd had mentioned ARPA. So there's a bill right now, H581, that is actually focused on municipal audits and implementation, including weatherization. So there's that, and then there's the possibility of ARPA funds, because that has now been opened up a little bit, so where towns can actually use their ARPA funds, and they can count up to $10 million as lost revenue. And so that kind of opens up what ARPA funds can be used for. The reason why towns that I've been talking that have been considering using ARPA funds for energy implementation projects, I've been suggesting holding off because there is so much going on with the legislature right now. There's a weatherization bill, there's this kind of municipal energy audit and implementation money that's going out, which is actually funded by the state's ARPA capital funds. So there's a lot going on right now, and we're all just trying to figure out where the money's going to come from. So that hopefully we'll have some information on soon. Let's see. So with the climate action plan and kind of climate change goals, Jim not only had talked about, I remember, the town plan and the update, because the Belknap, this Belknap project, if it goes through, that is essentially about half of the targeted renewable generation that the 2016 comprehensive energy plan kind of predicted that Tunbridge needs to do. They estimated somewhere between 10 or 11 megawatts of new generation. So that's a significant bump, but it's still a long ways from where we need to be. So with updates to EV charging, I know that GMP has been doing a lot of outreach with towns, including Rochester, and resiliency projects got brought up earlier. And so GMP is working on a resiliency project in Rochester, and as well as putting in a couple of EV chargers. And so opening that conversation might be a benefit. But again, what I'm suggesting to towns is kind of look through your mapping and where that would make sense. Right now, what we know is that the U.S. Department of Transportation released guidance just earlier this week or late last week, that states must first create the EV infrastructure deployment plans. So Vermont should be working on that right now. And then that's due August 1st, 2022. So early in the next fiscal year. And plans are looked to be approved by September 30th. So right now, what it's looking like is that EV infrastructure and federal funding is going to be closer to like 89 highway, rather than stretching into rural areas. But we're kind of waiting to get a little bit more guidance on that. So that's a little bit what I have on EV charging. Any specific questions that we have, maybe related to Tunbridge?
Yeah, Henry.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, pie in the sky here, but I have two fantasies on this infrastructure and EVs in particular. One is that it would be such an incredible drawing card for either of the Tunbridge stores to have actually a level 3 charger at it. People would come there in order to get charged and to do some shopping while they were charging up. The level 1 chargers, you really got to have them at a parking lot where you're going to be, because otherwise you don't accumulate any charge. I don't know if there could be a private public partnership or something that would somehow allow those to happen. I see country stores as being part of the cohesive element in communities. And it seems to me that in some way making it so that there was some support for that could be valuable, not just for Tunbridge, but across the state. So that's one. And then the second one, which is really futuristic, I would love to see shared EV vehicles, either a number of people buying them together and using them. The future of EV vehicles is they're probably going to be, as time goes on, designed to run maybe 1 million miles instead of 100,000 or 200,000. And maybe at some point they'll even be able to negotiate the back roads in a town and show up at your doorstep when you whistle them up on your phone. But maybe this is just something to think about in terms of charging points or whatever. That's definitely futuristic stuff at this point. But I'd be happy to hear comment on the store side of it, the chargers.
Well, Henry, I think it's much easier to answer the first part of that dream, which is honestly just proper planning. I think that's something that the Planning Commission and the Select Board, along with Todd and this kind of revamped energy idea, of kind of really looking through the mapping and GIS and really determining what would make sense. So for example, like at the town garage, having, maybe that's where you have the level 2 chargers, because people, or town offices where people are going to be all day, you can charge there, but you don't necessarily need that entire charge because you drove from your house to the office. You may not have to be on a charge all day, but how could the public utilize that? How could someone who's driving through and stops in Tunbridge utilize that? That may not necessarily have to have go from a 0 charge to a full charge because they're driving from Boston to Burlington. So there's kind of that kind of different ways of, where are we at in the town where we're serving different needs and kind of just understanding that. As for convincing our culture to switch and everyone share cars, you know what, I'll try and work on it.
Looks like Cecily, you've got a question.
Yeah, I'm all for the share idea. I wondered if you knew of any sort of institutional efforts with schools and daycare centers to try to expand the carpooling. I've got a kid at Orange County and a kid at Sharon Academy, and on days where it's just me and my husband's working all day, I am spending 2 hours driving them just to and from school. And I know there's, a lot of challenges there, but I just wondered if anyone knew of local efforts where that had been successfully expanded or implemented.
Definitely, I'll just respond to that too. That is one of the things that I think makes a lot of sense that often, for whatever reason, is not talked about as much as it probably should be. The conversations that I've typically been involved with and the other energy planner in our office is more geared at like EV, or, electric school buses. And I think we're a little ways off from that. I think those will eventually be the reality. But I think we're still a ways off from replacing entire fleets of school buses. I just think the economics of that isn't there yet. So it to me, it makes a lot of sense on the carpool front, as well as continuing other means of public transportation, even if they're not EVs right now today. So that's a great point. I wish I was involved in more conversations that were trying to solve that issue.
Amy.
Yeah, I was just thinking about, combining the EV and the public transportation. I mean, one could look at the stagecoach and start with a small fleet. I don't even know how many vehicles they have, but that could be a place to, help out with carpooling, kids going in multiple directions. It's a little lower scale than switching over entire fleets of school buses. So has that ever been thought of, or has anyone approached? Or if they approached you? I don't know.
I think it's something that people talk about, just until I think until larger EVs are really actually being cranked out as something. I just think the cost is too high right now, is usually always the pushback that I hear, that it's just not feasible yet.
All right, Lynn.
As I'm listening, it's sort of seems like we have a plethora of possibilities here, that with this Bilnet project, we can say this is going to be used for all these different buildings, and we will be able to provide economic benefit to the town. That's super appealing to me. And it's grid-based. That's very different than how are we going to solve a problem we have about being resilient when we don't have access to the grid? And we need to know about backup power. That's a different piece. So it seems like there might be, especially hearing that Belknap is actually 50% of what even GMP would like to see from the town over time. That's really interesting to me. So it's like we have Belknap to do one piece. It's about the grid. Then we have other opportunities to take advantage of some of the resources that are coming through right now through ARPA, et cetera. Anyway, that it's not a question as much as some comments. And I'm curious, maybe if Stephen, if you have anything you want to say about microgrids in this regard and backup power, that piece of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, microgrids and most of what we've, that kind of resiliency, most of what we've talked about is in conjunction with, we also help towns with their local hazard mitigation plans. And most of those go hand in hand. You know, across the region, it makes a lot of sense that snow or ice storms are typically what, as towns, we're most worried about. And why are we most worried about that? Well, because we lose power. So there's one part of it of having kind of a central source for power, but then, you know, looking into the future of how every house has a backup system, eventually working towards that. Not only that, but having, you know, it becomes more of a concern as we put more on the grid. And like Jim was saying, Tunbridge itself is in a good position, unlike some other parts of the region aren't as great of a position. But as we put more on the grid, we install more electric heat pumps, we have more EVs, the possibility of making sure that we balance that out. And that's one of the things that the Department of Public Service in the 2022 CEP actually does a really good job of talking to that grid constraint. Because yeah, that resiliency I think is really, I mean, it's important. And I think it's going to be part of the conversation in this hazard mitigation.
So this piece about looking at what a microgrid might be for Tunbridge, is our best resource for that going to be that these offers from GMP and Efficiency Vermont, to have them come and talk with us about what those options might be?
As far as I know right now, GMP is really the only ones doing it around our region. I mean, mainly because it's, you know, 90% covered by GMP. So I think they're best right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Yeah.
All right, Todd, I know you've got your hand up. I just want to see if anybody else has any other questions. Jim, you have your hand up. Would you like to
Yeah,
ask
sorry.
a question?
Go
go ahead.
I do have to leave in a moment, but before I go, I just wanted to say, I think you guys have a really compelling story, and there's, I think, opportunities, in my opinion, and I might be oversimplifying it, with the ARPA funds and the fact that you have the most powerful senator retiring this fall, that if Tunbridge could put together, working with Two Rivers, you know, a story. Hey, we've got this array going in town. We have the world famous Tunbridge World's Fair. We want to modernize at the same time, keeping our historic charm. We want to put a 3-phase level 3 charger at our store. You know, just paint a big picture and ask for some money. And the worst thing that can happen is you get a no. But at least you stake out a vision and it gets people kind of inspired. I mean, I think that the awesome work that Shona did down at the farm, that's about staking out a vision and going bold, and something happened. And what I really loved when I went to your planning commission was it wasn't a bunch of naysayers. You guys were like, okay, how are we going to do this? This is great. This is what we're supposed to be doing. And it's same with your select board, very functional select board. Really, Tunbridge has impressed me. If I wasn't so rooted in Brookfield, I'd be running over one more town. But I think you've got so much going for you that, and you've got a really good partner with Two Rivers. Make an ask. And even if you don't know everything, it doesn't matter. You can figure that out after, but there's money out there right now. And so that's my unsolicited advice. And mostly it's because you guys are very functional, and I see you have a motivation and you have a good story. So there's my unsolicited, and I'm going to sign off, and I really, really appreciate you
Wow.
inviting me.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Jim.
Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Some
So-
motivating words to end the day.
Yes.
And a little bit in there before Todd, Sarah Wright from Two Rivers, Stephen, you know her obviously, has already told me that the emergency part of the town hall and the town clerk's office probably would fall under being approved by ARPA. So at least that portion of it, we've gotten some encouragement.
Yeah, and I'm going to leave. I'd say both senator staffs are very accessible, and you could reach out and just say, hey, this is what we want to do. So anyways, I'm going to leave. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephen, I do have a question for you, and then I'll give it to Todd to wrap us up for the night. Look at Finn practicing his good dental hygiene here.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, as we were talking about microgrids and battery storage and just how fast things are probably going to start developing once the F-150 comes into production, is there a way that we can think about privately owned or privately located, like small energy generation as an opportunity for the town? Because, we are pretty rural, we're pretty hilly. Okay, you don't need to make faces. And thinking about, like, if we were to put in a solar panel here that could charge eventually a wall battery that's functional, and we could store power for our neighbors to charge up their batteries if we lost power for a long time. And maybe we have some other neighbors that are thinking the same thing. They're going to put in some solar panels. Could they be like a battery or like a community located energy facility, so that if we do have a big storm like Irene, when a bunch of roads go out for a long period of time, people can kind of call on their direct neighbors to charge their own batteries? And if anybody's doing that, or if there's any opportunities to think about not even like a microgrid for the town, but like very localized neighborhood energy generation.
Yeah, I mean, so people are doing a lot of that, but what I like, Laura, that you're telling me is you're looking at it in a different light. Most of the times we're talking about a group of low development, or maybe powering a multifamily unit, and kind of working in maybe one. A lot of times it's like kind of almost a remote village, or a little, something kind of, they meant to be off the grid kind of. But instead, this is supposed to be very much on the grid, but just specific planned. But instead of just simple generation, of actually looking at it from a mitigation standpoint when the hazard happens. And I think that can serve much more than just when danger strikes. I think that can serve all the time. And then you're better prepared when there's a problem. So yeah, and honestly, I think the great, again, we go back to the planning and just citing of that, and really looking at the maps. And I think that's something from DPS, we've been kind of given this kind of, I won't go as far as calling it a promise, but an estimation that we'll have new maps, target data and a tool to kind of look at that. With that, we'll be updating our regional plan, but I think one of the things I would love to see us do is work with towns on Laura, kind of what you're talking about, and going back through and citing with this in mind as well. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's great. So I'm going to
Um,
hand it over to Todd. Todd, you've got the last question, and then we'll thank Stephen and sign off. It's almost 8 o'clock here.
Well, I've had the pleasure of talking with Jim and Stephen well ahead of this meeting tonight, so I don't really have a question. I'm going to go to, first of all, thumbs up, even though Jim is not on the call anymore, for his wider vision of how we should approach not only our local representative, John O'Brien, but also our 2 senators and also Peter Welch while he's still in office, about maybe a big ask for a rural town. To go back to the emergency situation, as far as the town hall being used for that, there certainly is an opportunity to, I'm not a big fan of Tesla, but they're the ones that are making the Tesla Powerwall. There are other companies doing that. Green Mountain Power is certainly partnered with Tesla to have the Bilnet project supplying power to that Powerwall that then can be disconnected from the grid during an outage. So the storage is there probably to run the necessary needs at the town hall for 2 to 3 days. Would be something to be looked at in the long-term vision. As far as EVs go, I really think it has to be downtown. I know Stephen hasn't gone out to the town garage. It's people aren't going to go out there to charge their car. I've looked at 3 sites in town. One of them is directly across from the hopefully soon to open Tunbridge General Store. One is down by Rebecca and now Ingrid's office at the fairgrounds. And the other is over at the parish house. I think Kay Jorgensen is on this call. I'm sure if the town itself owns enough space to have a two-car space to be plugged in. I was thinking of level 2, but if we should go a little big and go for a level 3, which if you had to pay out of pocket is about $100,000, the level 2 is more like $15,000. There is a possibility of that being a private-public partnership. All kinds of ways to do the EV. I think it would be very popular, not only for the fair, for people coming downtown to the store, for people hanging out at the library, for people doing outdoor recreation. They're coming and we should be prepared for that. And I think this is a unique year for the select board, the planning commission, and folks that are really concerned about climate change in our town and the state of Vermont. And once again, a reminder to look at the goals that our energy plan has for limiting our greenhouse emissions, and transportation and heating are a big part of it. And maybe there could be a follow-up meeting as far as heating and efficiency in the future. I know Stephen didn't get a chance to talk about that much, but we have a lot of folks fall into a category where they could have their houses completely weatherized by Efficiency Vermont at no cost to them. So just throwing that out. So those are my final remarks. And thanks for the Planning Commission putting this on tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome. Stephen, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Just kind of to go off of Todd. Yeah, there's, and what Jim was saying, there's money out there. It's not being thrown at you, but there's
Very close.
there's a lot of things in the mix. There's weatherization, there's money coming for municipalities, and the state's trying to figure out exactly how to spend the ARPA dollars, as well as towns. So while it's not fun advice, sometimes I find myself advising towns to, hey, hold on to your ARPA dollars, because you can possibly, rather than spending it in one area right now, there might be money coming from the state, and you can hold those on and do a lot more in the entire process for the town. So to kind of, but I'd love to stay involved. Keep me in the loop with your planning, your ideas, and let me know where I can help and where you have questions.
Great. Thanks so much for spending your evening with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you guys.
All right. Well, that wraps us up for the evening. So thanks everyone for joining. And this will be recorded and put up on the Planning Commission page. So if you want to reference it or send anybody to the conversation, you'll be able to do that soon. Hopefully, we'll get it posted here in the next couple of days. So thanks. Have a good night, and we'll see you
you.
next month.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank
Laura.
you.
Planning Commission.